Hello, hello, peace and love, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Busboys and Poets Books Presents. Tonight we have a really special guest with us. We are here to talk about The Last Suspicious Holdout by Ladee Hubbard, which is a collection of short stories that it just really captures, quite honestly, it captures a large swath of time. And we'll talk about that a little bit later because that's part of the whole thing. But The Last Suspicious Holdout really just explores the relationships in a Black neighborhood over the course from the late 80s to the eve of Barack Obama's inauguration. And so the late 80s and the early 2000s, or I would say late 2000s, it's a lot of stuff that we can talk about there. And these last 12 stories, or the 12 stories within The Last Suspicious Holdout, they hold no bars. They are some of the most interesting ones that I have had the honor and pleasure of reading. And to give you a little bit more information about the author, Ladee Hubbard is the author of the novels The Talented Ripkins, as well as The Rib King. Her writing has appeared in Oxford American, Guernica, Virginia Quarterly, and Callaloo, among other venues. She is a recipient of a Berlin Prize, a Radcliffe Institute Fellowship, and a Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award. Born in Massachusetts and raised in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Florida, she currently lives in New Orleans. And so I hope you all will help me welcome her onto the stage. Hello, Ladee.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to be here.
We're always glad to host wonderful authors like yourself, especially ones that make it a point to specifically write about African Americans, like just people in general and the communities that they reside in here in the United States. But before we get to talking, unless you have a point that you want to make there.
No.
So we're going to go ahead and pivot to doing a quick reading for everybody so they can get a little glimpse of the beautiful and to the point prose that you do.
Okay, that's great. I'm just gonna read the first. I was gonna read the first two sections. It's like 4 pages of the first story in the collection, which is called Flip Lady, 1992. So this is how it starts. 1. History. Raymond Brown hears the sound of laughter. He puts down his book and looks out the window. Here they come now, children of the ancient ones, the hewers of wood, the cutters of cane, barreling down the sidewalk on their huffies and schwins, little legs pumping over fat rubber tires, brakes squealing as they pull into the drive, standing on tiptoe as they straddle their bikes and stare at the house with their mouths hanging open, just like before. Some of them he still recognizes. He made out with that girl's sister in the 7th grade, played basketball with that boy's uncle in high school. This one was all right until her brother joined the army. That one was okay until her daddy went to jail. And you see that girl in the back? The chubby one standing by the curb next to the brand new Schwen? She hasn't been the same since the invasion of Grenada 9 years ago in 1983. The Spice Island. When the Marines landed, she was 3 years old, living in St. George's near the medical clinic with her mother, the doctor, and Aunt Ruby, the nurse. The power went off, hospital plunging into blue darkness while machine gun fire cackled in the distance like a bag of Jiffy Pop bubbling up on a stove. Oh no, Aunt Ruby said, just like before. It's all there in the book on his lap. Colonizers fanning out across the Atlantic like a hurricane, not exactly hungry, but looking for spice. They claimed the land, they built the plantations, they filled the Americas up with slaves. Sugar kept the workers happy, distracted them from grief. And 400 years later, you have your military invasions and McDonald's Happy Meals, your ho-hos and preemptive strikes, your Oreos and Reaganomics, your Captain Crunch, and Kool-Aid. These kids can't get enough of it. They sit in the driveway, they shift in their seats, they grip the plastic streamers affixed to their handlebars. One of them kicks the kickstand and steps forward, fingers curled into a small, tight fist as he knocks on the kitchen door. Flip Lady, you in there? Just like before. They roam the entire earth in search of spice, so why not here? Why not now? Flip Lady, you home? It's me, Calvin. For the past few weeks, they've been coming almost every day. Raymond closes the curtain. He shakes his head and turns toward the darkness of the back bedroom. Mama! It's those fucking kids again. 2. The squeak of old mattress coils, a single bang of a headboard against a bedroom wall. The flip lady wills herself upright, sets her feet on the floor, sits on the edge of her bed, and stares at the chipped polish on her left big toe. She stands up, reaches for her slippers, straightens out her green house dress, and walks out the bedroom door. The flip lady shuffles into the living room where her 19-year-old son, Raymond, sits on a low couch reading, long brown body hunched forward, elbows resting on his knees as he peers at a page of the book on his lap. In an instant, his life flashes through her mind in a series of fractured images, like a VHS tape on rewind. She sees him at 16, face hidden behind a comic book, then at 7 when his feet barely touch the floor. And before that, as a chubby toddler, gripping the cushions with fat, meaty fists, laughing as he hoisted himself onto the couch. Without breaking her stride, and for want of anything else to say, she mutters, "I see you reading," and passes into the kitchen. The flip lady lifts a pickle jar full of loose change from the counter and looks out the kitchen window. "That you, Calvin?" she says to the little boy standing on her porch. "Afternoon, ma'am," Calvin smiles. She twists the lid off the jar, opens the kitchen door, and squints at the multitude assembled in her backyard. Calvin plunges his hands into his pants pocket and pulls out a fistful of dimes. He drops them into her jar with a series of empty pings. "Well, all right then," the flip lady says. Calvin glances over his shoulder and winks. She walks towards the refrigerator while Calvin stands in the doorway. He cocks his head and peers past her into the living room. Glass angel figurines and the tea set on the lace doily in the cabinet against the wall. Bronze baby shoes mounted on a wooden plaque. Framed high school graduation photos and Sears portraits of her 2 sons sitting on top of the TV set. A stack of LPs lined up on the floor. A dark green lazy boy recliner and the plaid couch where her younger son sits with a book on his lap. Calvin turns his head again and sees the flip lady standing in the middle of her bright yellow kitchen, easing 2 muffin trays stuffed with Dixie cups out of her freezer. The flip lady studies Calvin's face as he scoops the cups out of the trays, licking his lips, eyes lit up like birthday candles. She smiles. Her boys were the same way when they were that age, crowding around her back door with all their friends, giddy with excitement as they sucked on her homemade popsicles. She used to hand them out when their friends came over to play after school and on weekends. It was a way to keep them in her backyard where she could watch them from the kitchen window. A good mother, she wanted to know how her boys passed their time and with whom. She wanted to memorize their playmates' faces and study their gestures until she felt confident that she could tell the clever from the calculated, the dreamy-eyed from the dangerous, the quiet from the cruel. She hadn't done it for money. No one had to thank her, although her neighbors told her many times how much they appreciated her looking out for their children that way. The flip lady frowns. Of course, everything does change eventually. There comes a time when a mother has to accept that the promise of sugary sweets has lost its ability to soothe all grief. They don't want your Kool-Aid anymore. They're busy. They got other things to do. One day you find yourself standing alone in the kitchen, hand wrapped around a cold cup, melting ice dripping down your fingers as you wonder to yourself when exactly the good little boys standing on your back porch became the big bad men walking out your front door. She looks at Calvin. "How was school today, son? You studying hard? Being a good boy? Doing what your mama tells you?" "Yes, ma'am." Calvin walks around passing out Dixie cups to his friends. "Well, all right then," the flip lady says. So I will stop there. Those are the first 2 sections of the first story in the book.
And that story was the first one you wrote, right?
Well, it's the first, not the first. I don't know. It's the first full-length story I published.
Got
It was written way back in 2009. So Yeah.
So the first one published.
Mm-hmm.
Which one was the first one you wrote, if you don't mind me
I mean, I write, so I don't know.
Okay.
First one I wrote it was the first one I published, though. I just to respect my own efforts, I will say that.
You.
That's the only distinction.
For sure. What drew you to publishing this one first? Or was it really just kind of a here's some manuscripts, please tell me what you think?
I think I made a very conscious decision to try and publish my work. It took me a while to make that decision. And so that was a story that I specifically wrote with that goal in mind. And it really was the first full-length story I wrote trying to be a published writer. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Got you. Okay. So Flip Lady, it's such an interesting one because we follow, I would say, like 4 characters pretty like consistently over the story as it passes. And one of them is, of course, Flip Lady, her son Raymond. I guess you could count Calvin for a little bit since he brings
And he comes back. He's in another story, although he doesn't speak in that one. So, but yeah,
that might be good because those kids were when they y'all, if y'all actually really do have to read this because it pulls out just everything you could, like thinking back to your own neighborhoods, like it was hilarious. These kids literally, they tell this girl, she drops her little popsicle, like, go get you another one, go get you another one. And I thought they were gonna steal the bike, but instead they just tore it up. They just like, oh, I'm not gonna get too into it because folks might not have read it themselves, but it was so interesting. What led you to including the new girl? And does the new girl have a name?
no,
I didn't think so. Okay.
Nor does her mother. So
We just get Aunt Ruby again and again and again.
Yeah.
What made you choose to do that? Like, it's very notable whenever we have characters that we go inside their heads of, but they don't quite get a name.
Right. Well, her consciousness is very fixated on Aunt Ruby. So that's interesting. I don't know. It felt right to not just have her be the girl. And there's a couple girls in there. So I don't know. Some parts of that story are a little bit self-referential because I did spend not in Grenada, in the Virgin Islands. So maybe that's part of what that is, but it just sort of felt right. And she's not, I think her consciousness, she's very young and feels very displaced, is much more focused on what happened with Aunt Ruby. Do you know?
Sure. Yeah. We'll spoil it a little bit for the viewers at home. So we find out later on in the story that Aunt Ruby committed suicide. And that's why they moved back to the mainland. That's why they moved back to the U.S.
Okay. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that what they, it's not part of the story, but I don't think it worked out the way she says that to Tony, actually, in the story.
Yeah.
Everybody assumes that whatever they were doing down there was bound to fail simply because it did. Yeah.
So. It was so funny. She was like, nobody ever asked, like they asked why we moved there, but never why we come back.
Right.
That was so funny because she talks about like tourism and like voluntourism and how people always anticipate that, but they never quite wonder like, why'd you?
Right. Right.
Question: did you guys also call your islands the Rock? She refers to Grenada.
Yeah, people called St. Thomas the Rock. That's what kids.
Can you drive around in one day?
Did I what?
Can you drive around in a day on the Rock?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. I have a friend from the islands, and she's just like, it's tiny. It's tiny. You know everybody.
You do. I did back then. So if I run into people that are my same age, I usually either like know them or know their cousin or something. Do you know?
If not your cousin, their mama or somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know how that goes. My mom grew up in a small village in Nicaragua, so whenever we went back, you could literally do a cartwheel going down the street, and you would be in in the like jungle essentially for the next town over a mile away. So small places in the middle of just nature doing her thing. All right. So a big obvious thing like we talked about is this recurring theme of grief. And we see everybody kind of experiencing it and handling it differently. Like the girl, she, as you said, is very much kind of disoriented. She's very much like, I'm just trying to fit in, but I don't quite fit in, which is another theme that pops up every now and again in this novel. So she's experiencing her own version of grief, which for a kid is almost amplified and also simplified, which is so interesting to watch like that happening in her head, because just the way she says it, Aunt Ruby's gone. She took some pills. And
Yeah,
then
she actually never says that she died.
No, you never
I don't think she can process that fully. I mean, she can, but I don't think she wants to actually say it.
I don't think so. And now that I think about it, I feel like she often thinks about Aunt Ruby, like not even in the past tense, but like often in the present, like she's still there, like, you know, telling her stories and all of that. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. I was reading this, and as soon as I read that line, I was like, I gasped. I was like, what you mean Aunt Ruby? She's not here.
Gone.
Gone.
Gone. Yeah.
And she never quite says she's dead. And we have kind of on the other side where like it's very obvious that Sam, like someone has passed. There is a reason why Raymond has moved, I would think, moved back in with his mother, put his life on pause. And his mother is really just kind of going through the motions, you know, sleeping, getting up from that creaky mattress, going to the store, buying some Kool-Aid, so on and so forth. But could you talk a little bit about grief in general? Because everybody's experiencing it so differently. Everybody is responding to it so differently. And it seems like Raymond and Flip Lady are stuck in just a cycle. Raymond in the books with Sam's notes in the margins, and then Flip Lady with these kids and these Kool-Aid popsicles.
Yep. And who knows what's actually in the Kool-Aid. So Tony tells that there's another one of Raymond's friends is also in the house, Tony, and he tells her, don't drink that Kool-Aid anymore. She's a kindness on his part.
I wouldn't drink it if I were you. And that's what really made me pause. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was very interested. Originally, I wanted to write. It was too unwieldy, but I wanted to write about specifically the 20 years leading up to Obama's election. And I think that part of what I wanted to write about was the specific way of thinking about grief, or maybe a specific type of grief that is associated with not really it's not an ability. It literally is, I think, was in part a vocabulary issue in terms of how to express grief during that particular period of time that I was very interested in. So it is like some people called it like the post-civil rights era, you know, because, and so it was like I think it was not, I mean, you know, you have the victories of a sort, but you also have the fallout of that I think a lot of people are processing. And it shows up in you know, a lot of people that I knew, their parents probably had a little PTS, yeah, you know. So that's one thing. And then also I do think there were a lot of things going on with language and how certain issues were articulated, and how sort of racial issues were and class too, and gender. There was a lot of obfuscation in terms of how things were represented. And I was interested in all of that when I wrote about the period. Yeah.
I almost want to tease out the question of like class particularly, because I feel like I was at such a conflicting point when I was reading Henry 1993. Like that really jumped out at me, because Henry is quite an interesting fellow, you know, like He is like trying to say so many things, just very roundabout, and other people around him are like, I mean, Leon is about what he's about. He does what he says he does. And Henry's like, is it really good to be making all this noise? Like, is the good trouble going to lead my brother to get out, or is it going to leave him in there? And it was so interesting because his, like, I wouldn't even call them colleagues. Like, his employees were like very much like, nah, Leon's in here for the long haul. Like, he's about this shit right here.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
his brother, right? So, I mean, it's not maybe the most righteous thing, but I think it's a real question. People, there are consequences for standing up, right? So, I think from his perspective, when he says that, that's like a real question. Like, if you're just drawing more and more attention to him, how is that going to help? If he becomes like a symbol, is he going to be punished for that? Is he going to continually being punished for him? So it's not like the most noble instinct, but I think someone asked me recently, and I said I think Henry he's very afraid, and he really misses his brother because that provided him personally with a lot of guidance. So yeah, so that it's just that's what that was about for me. I think, yeah, it's not the most noble maybe, but it seems like something that would cross someone's mind. Like seriously, like I just want you home. I just want you back. I want you safe, And it's real in the sense that it leads to a lot of conflict for a lot of people. Do you know what I mean? In terms of their ideals and like how far in terms like who is my family, like who am I really, if it comes down to it, what do I, who do I really care about, right? So
Yeah.
it's not the most noble thing maybe, but I think it is something that it certainly crosses people's minds often.
And it's a human thing. Like, I
Yeah.
was reading it and I was judging Henry so hard, and then he was like, my brother's not a symbol. He's not here for you guys to like latch onto and put up as like,
Right.
onto the pedestal. And I was just like, damn, like, you just want your brother home. You just like, it was such a moment for me because you see all these other folks who are like talking to him, and they're kind of, I don't want to say side-eyeing, but it almost felt that way from the writing, like definitely kind of like, okay. Like, I think it was Polly who literally was just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I don't think Polly understands what he's talking about. I don't
No.
think Polly really, I mean, I think that the other employee does understand and is kind of disgusted by it, but I don't think Polly's just like, what are you talking about? Like I don't think he really is processing it on the same level. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't really make sense to him.
And Marcus was a whole other trip. Like, it's like a story within a story almost. Like, and I'm just left here wondering, like, what happened?
Well, Marcus comes back. He's in Crap Babies. Yeah. So just
and see, y'all, and that's the genius of this like novel. Like, at one point I almost sat down and was trying to do family trees and like little like connections to figure out like how are people connected, because we see these characters, they recur, they come back, and not in the same context in which we first saw them. Like, I might be basic for this, but it was gosh, what is this? I think Bitch, an Entomology of Family Values.
Mm-hmm.
That one was great because first of all, this story. So I'm with Millie. I am team Millie, 101%. I'm like, she's really out here trying to do some good with herself. And Miss Montgomery picks up that phone and she's like, who in the hell is this bitch? Who is calling my number after my housekeeper has gone home for the night? And I didn't miss the fact that we repeatedly see Cobb Hill. It's meant to be like, it's meant to be luxurious, be elite. It's got money.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wild. Like, I was thinking about almost like 1950s housewife parties, like, the things like there's so much decorum and like air of putting on a show for others. And we see kind of that show crack a little bit with Miss Montgomery.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn more and more about Miss Montgomery and her family. Like this story takes us from point A to point J to point P, you know. We find like, y'all, this is crazy. So Miss Montgomery is the wife of the local councilman, and you hear about him in the chapter Henry beforehand. And the more you hear about him, the more you're just kind of like, there's some susness about. I'm not quite sure what. Because as I'm hearing more about this, I'm like, this ain't right. And I knew that this like book took place, like part of it at the like, I don't know if I want to say tail end, but like the crack epidemic. That just is what it is. And I couldn't stop to think about, for those of y'all here in the district, our good mayor for life, Marion Barry. And I was like, at least Marion did his job. You know, he was known for his activism, the work he did in the DC government. But the more I hear about Montgomery, I'm like, what do you do?
Well, again, the he doesn't ever get to speak for himself because
Right.
of the women in his life, and this is how they perceive him. And most of them are also a little pissed at him when they're talking about him. So I'm sure he would describe himself in very different terms than they do. So, and I you know, I don't mean any disrespect, I guess is the word it was about the quote. It was about the quote that resonated all across America for the youth of the day.
I read this line and I cackled at home. I don't believe it. They heard him say, bitch, set me up. And it just, it carries its own thing. Like I had to sit there for a moment and just laugh. And then this leads us all the way into Montgomery's daughter, Tamika, who ends up like, she goes to school the next morning after her daddy gets caught up in a police sting of some kind. On the evening news, she got to go to school and see all of her classmates. And I'm over here like, this girl about to get bullied so hard.
Yeah.
They trying to make her feel like she never want to be born. And so a ball comes at her and she like deflects it, and it hits this other girl who's like known to just, apparently this girl got a mouth on her because she was scared. She was scared that it hit her. And we get introduced to our very next character, LaTanya, who repeats it. I don't believe it. Bitch set me up.
Yeah.
And I'm just like I actually wrote, Ayo, that was a little savage. Like just on the school playground, like, I saw your daddy get arrested last night.
These are not the gentlest people. They're not the most gentle people.
No, they're known for their hard-hitting truths and not having the decorum to just.
Right. So that's about it was about, I mean, the reaction to it is all from the perspective of children, right? That it's a good line. Oh, it felt good saying it. They, you know, and it becomes a refrain. So every woman in the story, they're all calling each other for various reasons, bitch. It literally is an etymology, how the definition changes as it moves, right? So, yeah, and that was I just wanted to write about that moment in the schoolyard.
And it really hit home because I felt like I was transported back to second grade, that like hush in the playground when something's gone down and people are waiting, like what's about to happen next. That happened. And I was just like, oh Lord. But I also want to commend you because adults writing as kids, like of course there's like the picture book genre, but people outside of picture books, sometimes they just cannot do it well. And yours were very genuine, like I'm a child, but it wasn't oversimplification either.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Childhood was rough. I remember it. It was not simple. It was not at all simple. So I do remember it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, yikes! It's all I've got, but that's childhood. Unfortunately, it's rough tumble for everybody.
It is. It's very complicated too. The things that I have children now, so I see it. How it's hard. It's very hard. So, and I can't intervene now. I'm an adult, so all I can do is I can, but not really. Do you know?
Yeah, you can try your very best, but isn't something as embarrassing as your mom getting into stuff. Like,
Mhm.
nope, I don't know how to handle the situation, but I don't need my mommy. And it's like,
Right.
but I could give you wisdom, which some folks in this book do have wisdom, and others I'm just like, I'm sitting here like, I don't know. I hope you will be okay. Um, so Latanya, but okay, we're gonna take it back because I started out with talking about how everybody's connected. What made you want to write this so interconnectedly? And was it hard? Did you find yourself getting a little confused yourself?
No, I didn't get confused. I really wanted to write about a community. I mean, I think that's why it is short stories. Because I wanted to write about a communal experience. And yeah, so for me that's what that was. It's just a lot of different voices and things are progressing forward at the same time. But I always wanted to write it about a community, and I was always interested in, I mean, for this, I was always interested in that particular time period. So no, I didn't get confused. It was hard. They're very different stories. They have very different voices. So it took a long time because um I was telling someone, because I think short stories, it's very hard to write them, to me, in my opinion, and in part it's because you have to find a structure for each one, which it takes me a while often to do that. So it did take a long time because every story is so distinct and has its own structure. So I had to go through whatever I go through writing a novel with each one. Do you know? Yeah. Does
Short
that make
stories,
sense? Yeah.
huh?
Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. Short stories are complicated because you don't have all that space for all the words like you do in a
Well, that
novel.
is true as also. Yeah.
It's
The level of precision in terms of language. It is true.
exactly. And just every single snapshot, every single short story is so different
Yeah.
from the other. Like between the last one, the next one, like they're just all so radically different. And it was refreshing because there wasn't a formula. It wasn't formulaic. It wasn't like, I could predict anything. I was really sitting here like actively gasping. My sister was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, I
Really?
was, because maybe I'm a little naive, but I was just sitting here like thinking the best intentions sometimes, and then something would happen. I'd be like, we didn't have to do that.
Oh. Oh.
But it was good. It was in a good way. I'm usually somebody who can like guess what the ending of the movie is, and I love when it's like short stories like these where it's like I have no idea where we're going, and then I'll pull the string that you've like kind of left hanging from the other ones, and I'm like, oh, and just kind of traveling through like the Montgomerys. That's the family tree that I just Elroy and them are just so interesting, and I'm sure that we hear more about them later on in the book as well. But I want to kind of go back to what you said because you said something really important about like communal. You talked about like the community itself, and you don't really name the community at any given time.
Like the girl, huh? It's like the girl.
Yeah.
Unnamed. Yeah. Well, because it's not really about a specific place. Like I thought I had the last novel that I wrote, The Rib King, isn't it, I mean it all of the research is based in Chicago. So a lot of that book is Chicago, but it's never actually named in the book because it's not really about a specific place. So that's part of what that impulse was for me. I hope it doesn't make it more confusing, but for me it was like it's not about a specific place. Like that's not really the subject either in The Rib King or in this. So that was part of what that was about, the decision to do that. It is the South. This one is the South. So
And you can feel it like just really throughout the text. And even the little proses, like the pieces of prose that you do, like the little bits of poetry. First of all, I had a little too much fun reading those out loud.
oh, good. That's nice.
I was like, okay, Miss Rhythm Scheme, I see us. I don't know, maybe that was just like me getting a little too excited, but
That's nice. That's nice
yeah.
to hear.
And I like not to get like, I don't know if pedantic is the right word, but you also utilize repetition a lot. And you mentioned this earlier, like it comes through very much as we go through the text. And I guess, is it for you, what is behind this repetition? Is it meant as a callback? Is it meant as, yeah?
Sometimes, yeah, you often, yeah. Like to put a word in a different context, in a different place. Yeah, I think about rhythm a lot. I can't move forward until the rhythm feels right when I'm writing something. So it's just part of how things make sense to me. And I actually think that there are a lot of things that are articulated through rhythm that are important. But I actually think there's a lot of knowledge that's articulated through rhythm, whether or not people are consciously aware of it or not. So yeah, so rhythm is very important to me.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I almost want to read this little portion of your work here. And it's from, oh gosh, the Latanya chapter, and that would be Bitch, an Entomology of Values. What a lovely, actually, no, I'm sorry.
There you go.
There we go. There you go. And that's important too. So this part really got me. But how do you hate something that is already a part of you? How do you become yourself without betraying that same evil look in your own eyes? And we go into this. It almost reminds me of like a preschool nursery song, but it most certainly is not that at all. My old man was easy. He gave me his last name, then stole my mama's money. Now ain't that a shame? My old man was greedy, gave me nothing but a smile, and the sound of him leaving while my mama cried. My old man must have loved me because he gave me his eyes so I can see what you're up to before you're fool enough to try.
Mm-hmm.
So that just really stuck with me. And I don't know if this was like particularly like if you were calling back to it, but at the end of that chapter where you go, the two of them took one look at each other and realized they'd spent their whole lives loving the wrong fools.
Mm-hmm.
It, first of all, beautiful, gorgeous,
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
It hit somewhere very deep in my chest because we so often hear, you know, like these little jokes here and there about like, yeah, your daddy didn't leave you much, but that hairline, your eyes, your what so have you, and to go so deep into it. And the end of the line, the last line I read was the reunification of brother and sister coming together after living their lives separated apart, both for like mostly financial reasons is what I really took it as. But it was also this very strange. Grandma was a weird person. Is that her name? Or
no?
Who do they leave Marcus with?
Just some old lady, some relative. Again, the narrative, because they all have some kind of, there's a perspective to each of them. So from the perspective of that story, it's the daughter doesn't know who she is. This is just been moving so much, she can't keep track. It just seems like they have family everywhere, and they just, you know, go and get on their nerves for a little while, and then they move someplace else. So from her perspective, it's just she doesn't even know what's going on. Her brother's gone. He's just gone now. Do you know?
And this is a story for those of you at home of Latanya, who we see grow up as time goes on, which is
she's the bully in the story previously. She's the school bully.
She's a school bully, and then you find out just the later part of her life from, you know, being dragged around the Eastern Seaboard, which that is a rough trip. I-95 is unforgivable at certain areas.
Her mother has not been able to provide her with very much stability. So they've been moving and struggling.
Mm-hmm.
She says that, sometimes they don't even unpack the boxes they carry with them from place to place. They just cart them around, and they sometimes forget what's actually in them. They don't have time to unpack them. So
which she mentions like every move we would lose some small significant thing. And I thought that was so just integral to kind of understanding that. Like, it's not nowhere near the same, of course, but even back in college when I was forced to move in and out each year, I was a student, I was low income as a kid, so I would have to stay on campus and work throughout the year and like rent apartments and stuff, and just always moving. And there was one year where I did not unpack. I was like, there are boxes everywhere, they're going to stay there because I know where everything is. I'm going to be moving in a few like months.
Right.
And it's this like transientness that really, like, when you're a kid growing up, it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard. Yeah. So, and then there's a picture in that story. She becomes very attached. There's a picture. It's actually a picture of her uncle, and you can see her grandfather, who she's never met any of these people, but she can see him in the background,
in the corner,
and she sort of and it falls out of the reason that song is in there is because it falls out of it's a cardboard box full of blues albums, and the bottom falls out, and she finds a picture wedged. Her mother finds the picture and she gives it to her. And so it was about someone who doesn't have a lot to hold on to, kind of creating something for themselves to hold on to, and then realizing that is not necessarily what will sustain her. Do you see? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So everybody is grieving in some different sense, but sometimes you create things as like coping mechanisms that, in this specific circumstance, you don't have anything else. This is what works, right? This is what helps me to survive this circumstance. But in the long run, is it actually serving you? So that's what that was.
That grief was honestly, it was heartbreaking for me to even read it. It felt like that realization that what she had always envisioned, what she had always imagined was no longer real, was really her childhood just evaporating. It was really kind of that final blow.
It was never real. Yeah, no, it was never real. So, but it was what she had. That was all she'd been given, was a picture of him in the background. And somehow, as she's obviously I would say I love all my characters, so things will come out of me, but a very creative and brave person. She was able to construct a palace out of that, right? A palace of inspiration.
And I was going to say, that's the exact word you use, a palace of inspiration, because she has come up with a backstory countless times that they've, like, moments that have never existed that just were so fruitful and rich for her.
Right.
Her own reality.
And she's a badass in him. She's a badass, like her grandfather.
He's a badass. You don't want to see him in the alley.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah.
There's grief in so many different ways throughout this novel. And that's what really catches me from LaTanya's, I don't even know what to even call it. I feel like I have to sit with it and just kind of think, like, just chew on it and digest it more, because this little girl really loved the hell out of somebody that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he did exist, and he was a dog, apparently, according to all the women in their family. It's just like, girl, stop it. But to her, that was her pappy, her love, and the love of her life, even.
Yeah, a lot of people love people that don't actually exist, though.
They do. I just like the fact that it's like a family member is almost even more, because you see so many depictions of like loving grandparents, the ones that cook you dinner, that'll make sure you get that extra cookie you don't deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And her life wasn't very stable, so she's left with just but a whisper of a memory that didn't even exist.
Yes. And again, it's complicated in terms of kindnesses, because whoever that old woman is, she did take in the girl's brother, and she did take care of him,
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really seem like, but it is. It's somebody that's willing to, I don't really want to deal with this, but you need help,
And she needed to tell her because she was like, ain't nobody else told you this, but listen, sit
No,
down.
I know. There you go. Another weird act of kindness in a sense, right? Because you need to snap out of it a little bit in terms of these you're talking about your grandfather. You did not know that man.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes love is expressed in very, I don't know, hard ways. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And we
So,
see that, I mean, we see that throughout the novel. We see that with Douglas, and the imaginary the imaginary drug dealer
yeah.
that he is in False Cognates.
Yeah.
That one was really interesting. But to take it back, I know that you said that there's no set place, right? And that it was more so about the era. Can you tell us a little bit more about the purpose behind you choosing? Like we've talked a little bit about it already, but I feel like we keep coming back to this place of like really time digging in and affecting how grief is being processed, how people are even going about their everyday lives and just, existing within that time.
Right. Well, I think that it actually was a very important era in this country. And I think that actually a lot of things that are going on now are in are there's just a lot of stuff that was not articulated. It was not being fully articulated. And I think in the effort to not talk about certain things, there just a lot of issues got kind of repressed or really denied for a long time. And so I do think there's a connection between the world of the stories and sort of what the things that are happening today. So
Yeah.
that was one thing. Yeah. So, and I guess I started writing it in 2009. So it was just
Right after.
looking back. Yeah, there was like a little blip where supposedly we were, I mean, I not people who didn't believe this, but, they would say, oh, it's post-racial because we have a black president. Everything's fixed now. Everyone, everything's, and there was a lot leading up to even the ability to articulate something so strange, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I wanted to write about. And I again, I do think it has a lot of bearing in terms of there's just still a lot that needs to be worked through in this country, right? In terms of race and class, in particular in the book. Yeah. Gender as well, so among other things. But yeah, this is it's because there's, I think there was a lot of I don't know, it was a pretty rough time, and I don't think it really got expressed or explored in a very honest way often.
All.
Yeah.
Like I grew up, like I was born in the 90s, but I feel like I don't even know that much about the first early half of it,
Mhm.
And I think one thing that we had talked about before we hopped on air with everybody was that just the trauma alone of being in like the post um, like civil rights era. And I say that with quotes because we never really got the full civil rights to say like post civil rights era. Um, but just the trauma of being black in this country and having gone through the experiences of, first of all, the intergenerational trauma that presents itself from being enslaved and then later on disenfranchised, etc. And I could really tell from this book that we were getting into, it wasn't explicitly about that, but we could see the aftermath of it all trickling down the generations.
That's accurate. I think it is about the aftermath. I think it is about grief. It's like processing what just happened and what's happening right now. Um, yeah, people I think a lot of, again, language, the way in which certain issues were expressed or the expectations for how they would be expressed changed. So there were a lot of things going on that were, in one sense, very overtly racist and classist, but they didn't really call themselves that. So it's just, yeah, it's the fallout, and a lot of things did change, right? I talk about this a lot. You had a lot of this is what I remember. There were a lot of images of very successful, like black people. And then it was like, here's the black majority. So it becomes like, if these people could get out, what's wrong with you? Why are you got everything you wanted, right? People are sort of bending over backwards now to do, give you all these I don't know, affirmative action, all this stuff. But why, so there was a lot of that. That's part of, because you asked me about crack babies before. So that's part of it. With just thinking about the way in which that phenomenon was framed in the media and in popular culture, and even to a certain extent in false cognates, like the idea that if you had a drug addiction, you were somehow a dangerous, violent person. Like everyone is a drug dealer. They're like these like criminals, and it's, I don't know, it was rough for a lot of people. It was a very rough time, and I don't think it was actually addressed in a very overt manner often, what was actually going on with people. Yeah. So that's probably what I was interested in. And as a writer, of course, I was interested in it on the level of language as well. Yeah.
Speaking of false cognates, that was a really interesting piece because we see that the father is really just not focusing in on what the dean of students is like. He's like, you need to talk about your son, and more than just like the actual story that he wrote, which it's such a simple thing, but the fact that you even included his son's words was very, I think, just powerful and hitting, because as we're going through it, if I'm not mistaken, Douglas, the attorney turned, Douglas, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's such a funny thing because we open up with this like my Uncle Jay, and I'm like, what is going on here? And we find out that Douglas is just, he was an attorney. He worked really hard, but then he got caught up after doing some coke, and then saw a case of police brutality, and of course no one listened to him. And this man that has in his own mind fallen from grace, he's at like rock bottom, and he is so fixated on these like spelling errors and grammatical errors, and meanwhile the dean is like, can we talk about your son and why he wrote this?
Right. I don't think he knows how to talk about that story to that dean. I think he's just trying, like, let's just deal with this, what this is, which is that his son's about to lose his scholarship. I don't think he wants to get into his own trauma with this man, or like, so he's like a lawyer. He's trying to let's just talk about what's right in front of us and how can we fix this, because he really doesn't want his son to, I don't think he wants to share. And I also think that the story is a bit embarrassing for him as well, because he can see that it's referencing what happened to him, but it's disturbing and kind of insulting. Do you know what I mean? So to him.
No, for sure. And like he's over here like flashing back to the like incident itself, the night of, when the officers are like hurling abuses at him, etc. And you know what? The audience isn't going to know what I'm talking about, but what did William pull out of his pocket? We'll talk about that after the show because I'm very curious.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, the guy talks about in the beginning, when part of his psych evaluation, he had to look at ink blots. Yeah, so that's an ink blot at the end. So for you, for everybody, like, what does he pull out? What do you think he pulls out? Yeah. What do you see? What do people see when they see him standing on the porch? What's he gonna do?
I saw the pearl-handed gun. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah,
that's what I saw. And you're over here like, yeah, it could be. It could be.
Yeah, it could be.
And so we've gone through a good amount of what the last suspicious holdout kind of holds in play. And when I tell y'all, it is just the largest breadth of different characters I have like been lucky enough to read about. It was really, really great. Ladee, if you don't mind me asking, what is one thing that you want people to walk away with after they read this novel? Like if there was something that you had to shout into someone's ear, even if like they read it and they're kind of like, okay, cool, I need to digest. There's one thing you could say to them and just be like, it's this, or like something you want them to walk away with sentimentally. What would that be?
Well, one thing is, again, like to really think about what was going on at that time in U.S. culture, U.S. history, and how people were actually experiencing it. I again have affection for all the characters as well, so I just respect the resiliency of human beings like Millie in there. There's people that they just keep going, and I find a great deal to respect and admire in the ability to keep going and not be afraid to reconstitute yourself if necessary. And that takes a lot of bravery as well, to like look at yourself and find the strength within you to just deal with it and keep going. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I just feel like there's a lot, people were grieving. I just want to really think about what was happening at that point in time, and again, what kind of bearing as the aftermath of a lot of things, like what bearing does that have on the world we live in now. Just think about that. Yeah. And enjoy the book. I forget to say that. Somehow I forget to say that.
You can always buy the book, y'all, online here with us or at your local independent bookstore. It's okay if you cheat on us. We don't mind. Do you have a favorite local indie over in New Orleans?
Oh, I have several. So there's a lot of writers in New Orleans. There's a lot of bookstores in New Orleans. It's a very nice place to be a writer. I'll put it that way.
I'll have to come and visit sometime then.
You should. You should. It's an excellent place to visit too for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, word. What time of the year is the best?
When it's not too hot.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very nice today. It's very nice now. But
nice. Well, we'll see what next year looks like with climate change, but I know. But do you ever think about your characters in today, in the year? Because we stop at, 2007 in the book. Do you think about them in today, in 2022?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them have more of a story. They have more story in my head. So yeah.
Is Millie one of them? I'm a Millie stan. For those of you at home, y'all will read why.
I'm a Millie stan too. Yeah.
What's Millie up to these days?
Oh gosh, I have to process that.
I mean, honestly, Millie could be doing a number of things.
That is true. That is absolutely true. There are many things she could be doing right now. So.
And so, Ladee, is there anything coming up for you that's exciting, like an event or something that you wanted to shout out while we've got you here?
Oh, no, that's nice. No, I'm just writing. I'm just sitting here writing another book. That's all I do.
And that was going to be my next question. You're writing another book?
Yeah.
Can we get like a short little synopsis or just themes?
Well, themes. One theme is the relationship between the war on drugs and the use of African Americans in medical research.
Sold. I would like
it's feel good. It's a feel good book. Never for the word. No, I hope people enjoy reading the book as well. I never say that.
I was gonna say, because I remember talking earlier, and you like it is a lot of like okay, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a lot of hardship, but like it's hardship that makes you think, and that makes you like, some of it warms your heart, some of it will not warm your heart. I'm not gonna lie, but it will always kind of make you think back to like we're all human, and the like just resiliency, as you've said, and the power that these folks have to just and that's what you needed in those times. I was but a wee egg in my mom, but I heard it was rough out here.
I heard it was rough. And I try to write an engaging story. I try to write, hopefully people will be engaged also when they read it. So it's not just like misery. People again are really complicated. That's part of what I'm interested in is respecting the complexity of human beings that are in the story. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So,
I knew it. I knew it as soon as I read Flip Lady, but I really struck home when you had Millie call Mrs. Montgomery and that phone conversation happened. And y'all, you really do have to go out and buy your copy of The Last Suspicious Holdouts series of stories by Ladee Hubbard to even know what I mean. Because when I tell you, this was like, I'm thinking 1950s housewife party. She goes to pick up the phone and it's her, her husband's other girlfriend on the line. And when I tell you, it went from Lucille Ball to like, I don't even have a comparison, but just somebody who's finna like, she was verbally just like, I'm gonna beat your ass.
yeah, you don't call my house. You do not call my house.
And it makes me think so much about like respectability and just a sense of like, don't you know the rules?
Right.
And I'm like, I feel like I would love to see what that looks like in the today of digital age, because
that's funny. That's funny.
You're funny. I was sitting here like, okay, Millie's got okay. And Millie was bold as hell, but Millie got the last laugh. We'll say that.
Yeah. So
all right, lady.
Okay, I'm glad you enjoyed the book. That's great.
We try to put out good books and highlight good books when we bring folks on to Busboys and Poets Books Presents. But no, actually, guys, like I'm not much of a fiction reader. I read mostly nonfiction. And this, while it's very succinct and to the point, you also don't spare any images, which I love. Like even that first passage you read, where you're discussing this like ragtag band of kids. And how like Raymond even relates to them and knows about them. It was wild. I felt like I was taken back to my little home village, Jalapa, and I was just like down from the neighborhood lady in the corner store, and she's like, "So that's so and so. His daddy's in jail, but he's all right. He'll be fine." And then that one, he will not be fine. But it is what it is, and just the hilarity and just normalcy around it. It's everyday life. Like this is what it is to be in a community. And I think that might be something that people are particularly missing now during the pandemic. So if you've been feeling alone.
That is true too. That's very interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Nice. So please, y'all, get The Last Suspicious Holdout by Ladee Hubbard. And we are done plugging. And I'm going to let you go and enjoy your evening, lady.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Very nice talking with you.
Awesome. And thank you all so much to our viewers at home. You can go ahead and purchase the book online tonight until 9 p.m. Eastern on our Eventbrite, or you can go to bookshop.org and simply look up The Last Suspicious Holdout. I keep getting the camera angle wrong, guys. The Last Suspicious Holdout. It's also a gorgeous book. So
thank you. Yeah, that I didn't do, but that it is. I love it. I love it. So
Harper did great. So,
yeah.
But if you're interested, you can also come and visit any of our stores in DC, Maryland, or Virginia to get your copy. And all right, have a good night, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us.